Dear students, welcome to the present segment on Ode on a Grecian Urn. We had finished the third stanza of the poem, and the second stanza and the third stanza, when read together, would be a little bit confusing for the new readers because it seems that Keats contradicts in the third stanza what he had already said in the second stanza. In the second stanza, he had pointed out the limitations of the figures on the urn. They are obviously eternal. They had added a kind of a quasi-permanence to life when they were created, but they also are limited in that they lack the vitality and the profundity of life, the very throbbing, living sense of life. In the third stanza, however, he, despite acknowledging that, he points out that they represent such moments of eternity that, in fact, comparing them to the human condition, man becomes depressed. Man becomes deeply aware, extremely conscious of his own mutability. In fact, there is no contradiction over here. Keats is actually trying to point out the paradox of art. This paradox of art had occurred elsewhere in Keats as well, in the Nightingale Ode also. Of course, there's not essentially a paradox of art, but the paradox of creative imagination. You can call that when it occurs in the Nightingale Ode. But over here, it's about art. And the paradox is something we have already explained before, that while art is to some extent superior to life in that it can invest life with a kind of a fixity, but it also freezes life. The fixity is also a kind of frigidity because the vitality of life is lost when it is transformed or transmuted into art. We'll come to the analytical reading or line by line reading of stanza 4. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leads thou that heifer lowing to the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore, or mountain built with peaceful citadel, is emptied of its folk, this pious morn? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ever return. Now he concentrates on the other images on the urn. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar? O mysterious priest, there's obviously a sacrificial scene over there. There's a green altar. Green altar can also suggest the process of nature. Okay? The color symbolism working over here. That we are all fated to be sacrificed before nature by our death. O mysterious priest, leads thou that heifer lowing at the skies. The heifer is a kind of a baby cow or an ox. It's lowing at the skies. It's raising its head, as you know, the way it normally reacts when it's dragged. Okay, and this scene of sacrifice somehow reminds us of again the subconscious image it draws is that of our sacrifice in the hands of nature, that all of us are subject to death, and human life is mutable. And all her silken flanks with garlands dressed. And it's a kind of a ceremonious one. As you know, in sacrifices, normally the animal that is sacrificed is well decorated, it is dressed up. And all her silken flanks. The flanks are the sides of the body of the animal. Okay? And the flanks are dressed with garland, they are decorated with garland. So they are ceremoniously taking an animal towards its sacrifice, somehow reminding us of the eternal human destiny. What little town by river or seashore? You can see the water body there, but perhaps it can't see the other bank. Therefore, it's either a river or either the banks of a river or the seashore. Or mountain built with peaceful citadel. A citadel is the core, fortified core of a city-state. So the citadel appears to be a peaceful place right now because it's emptied of its folk. All have gathered to the sacrificial site, this pious morn. So the citadel is completely uninhabited. And little town by streets forevermore will silent be. Keats is also musing on the fact that these inhabitants who have come out from their homes will never be able to return to their homes. This town will eternally remain silent, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ever return. Why does it look so desolate? No one can tell. Okay, again looking at, focusing at the paradox of art. Art represents the sacrifice. Art, records the fact that life is mutable. But at the same time, art cannot provide any solution to it. Art can, at best, make moments of life quasi-permanent. But the final solution cannot be reached by art. It's very close to the Shakespearean vision in the sonnets. If you remember the sonnet sequences, and the first 1 to 26, the first 26 sonnets, the poet lover urges the fair friend to marry and have a child like him, so that the child's beauty, his beauty would be contained in the child's beauty. And then he moves over to a different idea, the idea of representing the beauty of the fair friend in his art, in his poetry. And finally he moves over to a different understanding, as we find in sonnet, I think it's sonnet 118. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with a remover to remove. Now, he finds the real nature of love, which does not go away with time. But the idea of making someone immortal through poetry, however, was just a kind of a passing idea, but it is not the final solution. Here again, poetry or art is given a bit of superiority over life, because at least it can freeze the floating moments of life. But at the same time, it's also pointed out that it cannot be the final solution, because it cannot ever imitate the life in its truest form. We'll come to the final stanza. O Attic shape, fair attitude. Attic, the word Attic is Keats gets it from Attica, which is the east part of the central ancient Greece. Athens was in Attica. O Attic shape, Obviously, over here is nothing to call it Athenian or something like that. We will call it maybe Greek shape. He uses the term Attic, but he wants to mean Grecian. Fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. Breed are the decorative patterns all around the urn. It's overwrought with that. With forest branches and trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, cold pastoral. Thou silent form dost tease us out of thought. Now it just confuses us. Sometimes you feel that if you are trying to interpret something, you seem at one point you will find yourself somehow lost. It is the whole implication of this is perhaps beyond the capacity of human mind. That's the idea over here. Does tease us out of thought, as doth eternity, just as eternity is not imaginable for the human mind. Cold pastoral. It is a pastoral. Of course, it deals with the pastoral landscape, but it is also cold. Of course, Keats over here uses the tactual sense over here. And marble urn would obviously be a little cold, cold to touch. But cold pastoral here particularly refers to the cold over here. Again, reminds us of the fact that it lacks the warmth of life, despite containing so much of life on it. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain. Again, focusing on the quasi-permanence of the urn. In midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. Now these lines are very controversial. They come out like a moral to the poem. Now Keats completely disfavored a poem having a kind of a moral. In fact, in a letter to J.H. Reynolds, written on 3rd February 1818, he writes, "We hate poetry that has a palpable design upon us, a prominent moral vein." A palpable design means a prominent moral vein. In the same letter he writes, "Poetry should be great and unobtrusive, a thing which enters into one's soul and does not startle or amaze with itself, but with its subject." Unobtrusive also means that it should not try to push into us any of its own moral ideas. Then why is Keats over here coming out with the dictum, beauty is truth? It has become proverbial now. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. Now, first you have to understand whether Keats is saying this, or the poet is saying this, and who is saying this. To whom thou sayest. The previous lines are not very difficult to understand. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to many to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty. To whom thou sayest, thou obviously refers to the urn. So it's the urn that is saying this. Why is the urn saying that? It's not the poet. It's the urn that is saying. The urn is saying this because I had asked you to keep in your mind a phrase that Keats uses in the third line of the poem, Sylvan historian, and I had focused your attention on the word historian in particular. Now look at this. What is the work of a historian? What is a historian supposed to do? Should a historian only record the facts and details? No. The job of a proper historian is to find out the reality, the truth that comes out of these facts and details. So the urn is justified to any extent by pointing out the truth that comes out of its experiences. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. Now, what does it mean? This it's a figure of speech called chiasmus or chiasmus. Chiasmus is a figure of speech in which the syntactical pattern of the words in one phrase is reversed in the other. Beauty is truth, beauty comes first and then truth, and after the comma, truth comes first and then beauty. You can find the word pattern has been reversed. There is a repetition and the word pattern is reversed. Another example, very appropriate in today's context, the one very important, very well-known quote by John F. Kennedy: "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." You see, after the slight pause in the middle, ask not what your country can do for you. There's a pause, and then ask what you can do for your country. The two very central words over here, country and you, are getting reversed in the second clause over here. So this is a figure of speech called chiasmus. But what does it mean? Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. In order to understand that, we'll see a few other quotes. You'll read a few other quotes by Keats. And this is the beginning, the book 1 of Endymion, which was also written in 1818. "A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness." So now I think you will be able to understand beauty is truth. Here truth means eternal, or the real that is going to stay. And then the reversal of that, truth beauty.